Elise was looking for Nitzy when the doorbell rang, making her jump. She sighed. It was Halloween night, and there were kids out. Kids in masks. She hated masks. Not because they scared her, but because they were fake. She liked seeing people's faces. Grabbing the bowl of cheap candy, Elise took a deep breath. Okay. It's okay. Everything is okay. It was something her therapist had taught her, a way to calm her already frayed nerves. Not that it actually worked. She put on her best smile. She opened the door. Happy Hallow... She screamed. She shrieked. She dropped the bowl and she fell back. The boy was standing on her front porch. He was dressed in a white shirt and a pair of black jeans. Well, what had once been a white shirt and a pair of black jeans. Red stains. So many red stains. And what was that? The thing stuck under his fingernails. Fur. White fur. Tufts of it. Elise took all of this in. But what she was actually screaming at, what had actually made her fall, was his mask. Nitsy's face looked down on her, green eyes now pitch black. Empty.
Jack-o'-lantern. We've all carved jack-o'-lanterns at some point in our lives. We've also all heard the origin story about Stingy Jack, who started it all. Now I'm here to tell you that that's a lie. Or phrased better, not a lie, but not the complete truth. As the original story goes, Stingy Jack had upset the devil several times, and as a result was not allowed into heaven or hell. The devil instead sent him off with only a piece of burning coal, which he put into a carved turnip and then supposedly roamed the earth with it. Whether that's true or not, I can't tell you, but what I can tell you is all about the lantern cult. Supposedly Jack seeks out and communicates with deeply troubled individuals, hoping to have them fool the devil too, so he doesn't have to be alone on his eternal journey. He encourages them to commit horrific acts as a sign of devotion. It is likely that you've never heard of this cult, and there's a reason for that. They're very careful not to be caught. It began back in the 19th century and has happened to continue by past generations up until this very day. Now, Jack-o'-lantern might sound like a stupid name for a cult, but I can assure you there is nothing stupid about them. No one is entirely certain if they are completely human, but what they do is terrifying. Following the origin story, where people carve turnips and potatoes to protect their houses from jack-o'-lantern, the cult preys only on those who fail to place a lantern on their porch or outside their doors. It is said on Halloween night they go to towns all over the world, searching for houses with no lanterns. When they find these people, they enter their houses by means unknown and carve gruesome figures into the victims. They then offer these twisted, brutalized victims as a sacrifice to Jack and set them on fire, watching the shadows dance around the interior of their sick carvings. You might be wondering why you have never heard about any of these cases or noticed anything firsthand. Well, the cult gets rid of any trace of evidence. They're very good at it, but they've been doing it for centuries. Also, have you ever been trick-or-treating and noticed houses with the lights off and no decorations? You probably thought they were rude people ignoring trick-or-treaters, but more often than not, they've already fallen victim to the lanterns. So next Halloween, make sure to carve a pumpkin and put it outside of your porch. You never know who's watching.
Trick or treat. Don't look under the sheet. The same boy has been coming to my house every Halloween for 4 years. He wears the same ridiculous costume every year. A ratty, blank, off-white tablecloth that hangs much too low off his body, scraping the dirt with poorly scribbled hollow black circles for eyes. The appearance isn't quite memorable by itself, only in the quality and character and the way it moved. I saw him, every year, comes across the lawn just as the sun set behind the hill, bathing our house in an ominous violet shadow, moving towards me, but never seeming to demonstrate any actual steps forward. It was so bizarre, inhuman sensation, one that I never quite grew accustomed to, moving, but unmoving, crossing ground like he was being pulled along by a string. There was something else, too. Something I noticed on our first meeting 4 years ago when I held out our plastic Rite Aid jack-o'-lantern bucket and watched as the sheep came forward where a hand should have been, removed a portion of its treats, and buried them under that drab cloth. He smelled. It was a unique stench. Wet mud, a spoiled milk, raw meat left on the counter. Putrid, nauseating, indescribable mostly, except that I never forgot it. It was there, always there, when that boy visited each Halloween. It lingered too, for hours, even after he left, like it poisoned the very air around him. It was always the same, every time, every Halloween. Except for last year. I haven't been able to tell anyone. Not until today, not even my wife. She doesn't care much about Halloween. She doesn't like to see the kids anymore, not since our son died. She stays downstairs until it's over. I don't think she knows about any of it. Last year, curiosity got the better of me. I did something that I shouldn't have. I was ready for the boy that day. I waited. I watched. I knew when he would arrive, the perilous, rolling black dusk where the world seemed to stop and anything was possible. He came, just as he always did, just as a dead chill came down from the hill and shrieked against our house. He crossed the yard, motionless, as he always was, his tattered cloth unmoving. I opened the door and smiled, happy to see my silent friend, wildly anxious to finally discover what could have possibly been underneath that strange fabric all of these years. I thrust the bucket in front of me like some sort of offering. When it moved, I moved faster. I grabbed the sheet, right at the crown of the head, and pulled down, wrenching it free in a violent swirl. She didn't move. She didn't try to hide. It was my wife, wearing my dead son's clothes, wearing my dead son's skin. Her face was blank except the worms, dozens of them, pale, greedily snaking through her horrible decayed cheeks and forehead. She didn't seem to recognize me, or didn't seem to care. I stood paralyzed, watching as she took the candy, replacing the sheet, and left. I haven't told my wife about any of it, and I hope she doesn't hear about this. I don't think she knows.
This story took place back in 2008. My family was invited by one of my brother's friends to go trick-or-treating in their neighborhood. At the time, I was 13 years old. I'm a male and I have a very tall build. The night went as normal for the most part, until I got to this one house. After leaving the house, I was suddenly tackled to the ground by a kid of about my age, who put a knife to my neck. My first reaction was to kick him off me. Back then, I was known for my ability to send people flying a few feet away when pinned down. He flew off. Next thing I knew, I see more kids of his age around me, all of them with pocket knives as well. I knew I could take on one kid, but the 6 or 7 I was no match for. I bolted as fast as I could, and the group gave chase. I probably ran for 10 to 15 minutes before I found a place to hide. I jumped, and about 20 seconds later, I saw the group run past me. That was my cue to return to my brother's friend's house. Nothing too serious happens after that. Though, as we were leaving the area that night, my mom pointed out a few cop cars with some kids getting inside. One of them looked like the kid who tackled me. When I saw my brother's friend next, he mentioned that no one was hurt by them and they were just playing a prank. But it was enough for someone's parents to call the police.
My name is Sin, and I'm here to tell you a true tale of terror. See, it happened almost 20 years ago, when 2 young, vibrant new paranormal investigators were fresh on the scene. They had many ideas, except one of those ideas was rather foolish. You see, they wanted to make a mark. Oh, and they did. Except they used the wrong tool to do it. Almost 20 years ago on a November cold night, these 2 investigators decided it would be fun to dabble in the Ouija board. A board that is commonly used to contact the dead, except you never really know who you're talking to on the other side. Whilst the night was pretty uneventful, it was what followed that began a reign of terror. It began with knocking sounds each night between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. Just strange knocking in random places around the household. These investigators didn't really understand where it was coming from, but that's where it began to get a little more strange. Things would go missing. Items would suddenly break without any known cause. But it was happened on the 7th night, which they will never forget. You see, these investigators knew that they had done something wrong, and they knew they had to put it right. What they failed to do by playing with the cursed board was to close it down properly. And just because they didn't do that one thing, well, something came through that they really didn't want. A demon, a demonic entity, had made its way through the dimensional portal, and on the 7th night made itself known. These 2 investigators called in 3 of their friends to help them close the board. It was candlelight. It was 11 p.m. Everything was silent until it happened. A shadow rushed past the group, sending cold spots running down their spine. But one investigator fell to the floor, his face turning blue. When the others rushed down to see what was happening, it was clear he was being choked. On his throat, what looked like 2 pressure marks pushing in, trying to squeeze the life from this investigator. Nothing worked for the first couple of minutes. The investigator was slowly dying until, boom, it stopped. As the investigator tried to climb to his feet and catch his breath, it was then that something truly terrifying happened. Whilst they were gathered around the dining room table, trying to console this investigator, the fog on the window began to spell out, "Release me no more." Then the window shattered. A cold rush ran through the entire house until there was silence. The demon had gone. To this day, those investigators will never forget that moment, that they played devil's advocate with something they did not understand. The moral of this story is, if you play the devil's game, you will get burned.
So this happened a couple of years ago when I was 18. I had just finished high school and was only working part-time, so I had tons of free time, and most of it was spent with my girlfriend. When Halloween came, we made plans to attend a friend's party, but that fell apart in a big way. Long story. And so we decided to have some fun and seek out some haunted houses. We live in one of the biggest cities in the Midwest, so there was a lot to choose from. Most of the places we visited were pretty cheesy. Some guy in a bedsheet jumping out and yelling boo. The occasional plastic spider. You know the stuff. But then we came to one that was really something else. It was a fairly small booth set up down a busy pedestrian street and was marketing some sort of tech company. Virtual something maybe. I don't know. I had never heard of it before and I didn't really bother trying to remember it. Besides, it wasn't the company that was supposed to draw your attention. It had a sign which read, "Experience pure horror in VR." Now I always thought VR was cool, but being a broke teenager, I never actually had the chance to use it, so I was pretty excited. My girlfriend felt differently, however. Normally she was a huge horror junkie, but this time she seemed spooked. I asked her what was up, and she said that it just felt off to her. I shrugged my shoulders, told her to wait for me to come back, and I stepped into the booth. Inside, an admittedly quite attractive lady directed me to a chair and placed a VR headset on me. She asked me if I was ready, and when I said yes, the screen turned on, and I immediately found myself in the most immersive virtual world I had ever been in. The graphics were amazing. Not quite photorealistic, but the total immersion of VR made that irrelevant. I felt like I was really in that world. Within the simulation, I was strapped to a rail car, and there was no real way to move, but I could rotate my head and look around me. As the railcar started, I was brought through an amusement park-esque haunted house experience. At first it was really tame, and thus kind of lame. Lots of ghosts and vampires and other basic stuff, though the sheer immersion did make it a bit more interesting than a regular haunted house. Now the whole experience was mostly like that, just generic Halloween monsters and jump scares. But what really sold the experience was the narration. The narrator had a soft but confident voice, and it really reminded me of a college professor. In fact, what he was talking about was kind of like a lecture too, about the inevitability of death, man's irrelevance to nature, and how God didn't exist. As the ride went on and the voice kept talking in my ear, I found myself getting more and more scared. Not at any one thing, but just the way that the narrator would distract me, just enough for the monsters to take me by surprise. And then, when I was used to the monsters, the narrator would come back into focus and remind me of the emptiness of existence. As the narration went on, things started to get more personal. He started to shift focus away from God and nihilism and onto my family and my loved ones. He started asking me if I loved my girlfriend more for her personality or for her body. He asked me if I thought my parents were happy that I was born. And as he was saying these things, the monsters jumping out started to change. Instead of zombies and vampires, it was my father covered in blood, my mum with her wrists slit, my girlfriend with half her face blown off. At one point, the monster that jumped out was me, at the age of 14. He was holding a gun, and the narrator asked me if I was truly happy that I hadn't killed myself. I don't even know how he could have known about that. Eventually the ride came to an end, and the railcar stopped. Then a hooded man appeared. He spoke to me, and I realized he was the narrator. He said that though my journey was at an end, he was going to leave me with something that would make me remember it for the rest of my life. Then he pulled out a knife and ran it across my forehead. The screen went black, and the headset was lifted off me by the attractive assistant. I thanked her and walked outside to meet my girlfriend. I told her all about the experience and how immersive it was, but then what she had to say once I was done will stick with me forever. She pointed at my forehead and said, "How did you get that cut?" Hey fearsome friends, thanks for listening. I hope you're all having a crazy spooky Halloween. Please take some time to go check out all the other narrators in this video, and if you'd like to support my channel further, you can join my Patreon for just $1 a month. Stay safe, stay happy, and remember, keep being creepy.